Welcome to another Gran Turismo Sport tutorial. Today we're featuring Group 3 cars at BB Speedway, which I've already done a tutorial for before, but that's with a different car. Since the update involving the Supra, well, the Supra is now the best Group 3 car for this track. Before, it was the Volkswagen Beetle, but the Supra seems to be about a tenth or so faster than it. This particular lap is 0.130 seconds faster than the previous tutorial, and it's with a different car. So it seems worth going ahead and doing it. Before I ran a 25.128, now I've actually ran a 24.998. So, I'm one of only 2 people in the Americas region to actually do a 24 in the last event here. So, it seems worth going ahead and showing it. And as always, I'm with a controller, and the particular settings I'm using for this one is counter steering on strong. Generally, counter steering I put on strong unless it's a 4-wheel drive car in some circumstances, and a front-wheel drive car in all circumstances, but this is a rear-wheel drive car. I think for all rear-wheel drive cars, I go ahead and use counter steering assist. And for traction control, it's on 1 here. Usually for Group 3, I use traction control on 2, but there's really no low-speed turns here. So by the time you're on the throttle, you already have a pretty good amount of grip. So traction control on 1 works fine. Actually, traction control on 2 hurts slightly here for a high-speed turn like the one coming up. But anyway, getting into the actual lap and not just the settings. With me being automatic transmission, I may not be utilizing this car's entire power band, because traditionally the Supra is one of those high-revving JDM stereotypical cars that you would like blow the engine on doing such high revs. I honestly don't know if this one is or not. And I don't know that much about the Toyota Supras in general. I just know that's kind of sort of like what people think of when they think of Supra. So, automatic may not be doing it its full justice, but nonetheless, I still got second in the Americas here, so it ain't bad. Anyway, continuing on. For the run-up to your best lap, you want to get as high as possible on the banking, and you want to do that about halfway through the turn. I tried going into the turn already being high in the banking, so I don't actually have to go up a hill, but it seemed like it really made no difference, because if you go up the banking, you're not actually steering as much, so therefore those kind of neutralize each other. So I just go up the banking a bit, and by the time I'm at halfway, I'm all the way up there. Halfway through the turn, I'm all the way up the banking. And that seems to be as good as anything, and much easier to do than it starting high up at the banking, because then you have to turn pretty hard the entire time and avoid that wall for that much longer. But anyway, continuing on. I also tried going all the way to the bottom, leaving the turn, and all the way to the top, leaving the turn. It seems like going all the way in the bottom, it's just too much steering motion to the point of you lose speed, even though it is more banking being used. It's overall not worth it. And staying all the way at the top, well, then you just don't use any banking, so that also slows you down. The optimal way of doing it seems to be leave the turn about the highest part of 1 groove down. Meaning you're pretty much, the highest part of your car is about on that white line. Not quite, but you're about all the way 1 groove down. And then going into the lap, get all the way close to that wall as possible. And honestly, I know this is a bit cheaty, and I agree, this should be fixed, but nonetheless, it's how it is. It's not really wall riding, because it's for so little amount of time, but you can kind of wall grind for a bit while braking for this turn. Don't do it too hard, because then your car gets unstable, but just kind of nudge the wall a little bit while braking. And then once you do that for a small amount of time, go ahead and start turning in. This car, it's not really the best to brake while turning, so it does need some trail braking, but it's not the worst either. Practice makes perfect, but it's a pretty stable Group 3 car. If you're pretty good with Group 3 cars in general at this track, you should learn this car pretty quickly. In terms of going to the apex for this turn, as always, never go to the part with no banking, aka for this particular track, the yellow line or under. And for speed, I'm in 4th gear here. Different people have used 3rd gear, because as of now I'm on the bottom of the rev limiter, like right before it would switch down to 3rd and automatic. But even though in theory you're going to get more power with a high RPM 3rd gear than low RPM 4th gear, you get a lot more grip in 4th gear, and with traction control 1 instead of 2, that seems to be the overall best way of doing it. Maybe, just maybe, if you're on a wheel, and you can get it really precise, 3rd gear may be better. Because I noticed the top time in the world on a small track like this is still 0.5 of a second faster than what I got, which is a good amount on a track this small. And I think that's where they're getting it, because really the rest of the track is full throttle. It's just about car placement there, which is just as easy to do with a controller as a steering wheel, pretty much. The main thing with a controller is varying speed while slowing down. Full throttle, controller versus wheel, there's little difference. But anyway, moving on. Again, I'm not an expert with a wheel, but this would be my best prediction for a wheel. With a controller, well, I mean, just do what's on screen there. Pretty much, if you're at like 109 and as close to that apex as possible without hitting it in 4th gear, it's just full throttle out. Traction control 1 keeps it stable enough to where you don't spin out, but it's also such little traction control 2, it's full power. As you can see there, there's no red bit there, so it is fully on the power. Oddly enough though, traction control 0 is pretty much a spin out if you're going 109. Like 105, it kind of works if you're in 4th gear, but 109 not so much. Even though both of them show it as no like red, meaning the traction control is making the power go down, there seems to be a difference between 0 and 1, and it matters the most for this turn. I do better with 1. That may depend on the person again, but just I used 1 there and it worked out fine. The rest of the track honestly is not terribly hard. It's a rhythm type thing and you need to figure out the rhythm, but really once you got that rhythm, it's pretty easy to do it within 0.5 of a second of your best. But 0.5 of a second, as I said, makes a difference in the qualifying. Maybe not so much in a race, but in qualifying it does matter. But anyway, as for doing it, start on the high side, go to the low side. Get to the low side by, I'd say, about 2/3 through this turn. As always, you don't want to go to the part with no banking. And you kind of just gradually decrease to where you're on the lowest gear by about 2/3 of the way through the turn, but you're on the very lowest bit pretty much as the turn exits. So just start on the outside, gradually go to the inside, and if you're pretty much completely to the inside without hitting the part with no banking by the end, then you did a good job. In terms of speed, I'm going about 149 here. That seems fine. I mean, I don't really know how you could really gain much more speed through here because you're just flat out of track. Literally flat out of track. That bit's flat. You don't want to go on a flat. But out of the turn, stay up high as much as you can. This part is probably the trickiest of the rest of the track, because you pretty much have to get a smooth line through this part, or your car is going to be kind of unstable for the next part, and you lose 3 or 4 miles an hour in terms of like friction or whatever. Steering angle being higher equals you lose speed. Smooth is definitely best through here. And the way I found to do it is kind of like sweep into this turn, meaning instead of just complete outside to complete inside, just kind of gradually do it. I gradually turn a little bit beforehand. I guess I'll go back a little bit. There's not 100% of a way to like do the steering input on this, but I think y'all can kind of tell by showing it on this, like closer up too. Like as you can see there, I did turn a little bit left, but at this point I guess it's actually not too bad. I actually see a point in which you could compare it to. Just be on this side of the second groove. There you go. Actually, that makes it slightly easier, and then I just figured that out too. I need to remember that. Just have my car placed there, and I'm good. Okay then, so on the left side of the second groove closest to the left part before that bit, and you're good. Then start turning. Again, smooth most in there. Turn as much as you need to get close to that apex without hitting it. And then you're good for a little bit. Just catch your breath for a second or two through here. And for the next turn, I still don't think I'm doing this perfectly. Maybe I'm losing a bit of time through that first turn, but I also think I may be losing a little bit of time through this turn. Because even though I'm way on the bottom here, I guess it was the angling in that I got a little bit off. Because even though I start way on the bottom here, I end up going more than a groove up top. And I know for a fact I'm technically doing it slower because my best split time for this section is a whatever it is for the seconds, but the points of a second was like a 9.7. This particular lap I ran a 9.9. So there is time there. I don't really know if it's like a direct correlation type thing, meaning I had to have been slower for the first section by taking a wider angle or something. But nonetheless, that's just how it is. Generally, it seems like it's faster if you're stay completely on the bottom there and don't go up any. But physics say it's better to kind of do what I'm doing there because you end on the bottom more doing that. Because if you stay on the bottom completely, the car just doesn't have good enough handling to exit on the bottom. But here you can swing in a bit and it's better to stay on the bottom. It does that better. If you stay completely on the bottom to begin with, you're generally about a foot or two more up the track. Which that in and of itself would slow you down, but also technically this was slower, even though this was my overall best lap. That particular section was slower than my best. So I don't know if it just comes down to not really luck, but more just being able to get both sectors as close to the max as possible while keeping them both close to the max, if that makes any sense. Like, sacrificing one sector to get another sector isn't really worth doing. It's just better to keep them as close to the max as possible while keeping them both there, if that makes any sense. I guess that's what I did here, and well, it worked out. I got a 9.98, as y'all can see there. So, I mean, I still put a whole heck of a heap of steering angle into that last turn. The car just didn't really stay on the very bottom, but it did work out. So, that turn may very well be a practice turn. That might not necessarily be a wheel versus controller thing. But I still think the first turn wheels are better for that one. But nonetheless, I was still within about 600th of a second of the top time in the world. I think it was like a 9.41. So it ain't bad. It can be very slightly better, but very slightly. My theoretical best is about a 9.7 for that last sector and for the overall lap. I guess PD likes running Group 3 cars here because they're pretty easy to figure out times. It's like the max you can get on each is just barely under the full second, so it's easy to add up, which is nice. And as I said, theoretical best may not be literal best because there's like physics in there and angles and all that. I'm not a math major, but there may be more time in there is really what I'm saying. But this is, I think, truly really the best I can do. My second best time was actually an 001. My third best time was like an 002. But I've never once had a time where I've had like a 9.7 through that final sector that was anything better than like a 0.1. Meaning, in order to actually get a faster time through the last section, your first section's so bad it doesn't really matter. For me, at least. So there you have it, folks. That's updated tutorial for this track with Group 3 cars. I would love to have Group 1 cars are in here. That would be really fun. I'd like to see that in future PD, wink wink, but whatever, this is Group 3 cars. That's as good as I can get really with a controller. There may be time out there. There technically is because people's ran it, but it's impossible to say with a controller because it doesn't show those statistics. But nonetheless, it ain't bad. I hope y'all enjoyed this and learned something from it. And as always, yeehaw!